Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the cradle of ancient civilizations, where the highlands of Ethiopia meet the heavens, a version of the Bible has survived for millennia, untouched by Roman hands, unfiltered by European councils, and unshaken by Western interpretations. This Bible, written in Guizi, the sacred liturgical language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, holds secrets that the rest of the world has never dared to examine. Among its most startling revelations is this: the devil, as we have come to know him, was once a woman. And more provocatively, her role in the Garden of Eden was not one of pure evil, but of rebellion against unjust authority. To the Western world shaped by centuries of Catholic doctrine, such a notion sounds blasphemous, absurd even. But to Ethiopian mystics, monks, and scribes, custodians of a spiritual lineage older than Europe itself, this idea has roots as deep and ancient as the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. In these Ethiopian texts, especially those preserved outside the traditional Western canon, Eve's encounter in the garden was not with a devil in the form of a monstrous, conniving beast, but with a divine feminine being, sometimes described as a serpent, other times as a radiant woman with wisdom surpassing the angels. This being is called by many names in Ethiopian apocryphal literature. One of them is Erasure, and another, more haunting, is Leila, which some believe to be the feminine precursor to Lucifer. This version of the story claims that Leila was a fallen angel, not because she rebelled against God out of hatred or pride, but because she questioned a divine order that demanded blind obedience. She was a bearer of knowledge, not a corrupter of souls. Ethiopian theology has always occupied a unique place in the Christian world. It is one of the few ancient Christian traditions that has never bowed to Rome. Its canon includes dozens of books omitted from the Roman Catholic and Protestant Bibles, texts such as the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, and the mysterious Book of the Mysteries of Heaven and Earth. In these writings, a radically different spiritual landscape emerges: angels with complicated loyalties, demons with tragic backstories, and humanity caught not in a tale of sin and punishment, but a divine miscommunication and celestial politics. One of the most illuminating texts is the Cabra Nagast, the glory of kings. It does not directly call the devil a woman, but it lays the groundwork for a gendered rethinking of the Edenic fall. It frames the fall of humanity not as the catastrophic fault of Eve, but as a necessary initiation into divine knowledge. Eve is not duped, she is awakened. And the being who awakens her? She is serpentine not in appearance, but in power, a feminine spirit misunderstood and miscast by later patriarchal scribes. The connection between the devil and feminine divinity was not invented in Ethiopia. Ancient Mesopotamian and Canaanite myths spoke of serpent goddesses like Tiamat and Ashara, powerful creators and destroyers, often later demonized by monotheistic religions. In early Jewish mysticism, the figure of Lilith emerges as Adam's first wife, exiled not because she was evil, but because she refused to be submissive. Western theology eventually recast Lilith as a succubus, a child-killing demon. But in Ethiopian mystical writings, she resembles more of a tragic fallen angel, a being who defied divine hierarchy to grant humans the freedom of knowledge. The Vatican, since its rise to power in the early centuries of the Christian era, undertook the enormous task of organizing and homogenizing the diverse and often contradictory spiritual texts floating around the Mediterranean. Councils were held, apocryphal books were banned, and heresies were violently stamped out. Gospels written by women or about the feminine divine were among the first to be burned. The Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, and several Gnostic writings, all of which speak of sacred knowledge, gnosis, and elevate feminine wisdom, were cast into the shadows. But Ethiopia, never conquered by Rome and never colonized until the brief Italian occupation in the 20th century, preserved its own Christian traditions, untainted by Vatican censorship. Its monks continued to transcribe and study scriptures that Europe had long forgotten or actively suppressed. In the high monasteries of Tigray and the dense forests of Lake Tana, scrolls written on deerskin and ancient parchment speak of a spiritual cosmology that elevates balance between the masculine and feminine, between rebellion and order. One such manuscript, known only to a few scholars, contains what appears to be an Ethiopian parallel to the Genesis account. In it, Eve's temptation is less a test and more a moment of empowerment. The serpent, female and luminous, teaches her not to obey blindly, but to question, to learn, to awaken to the divine within. The fruit of knowledge is not a curse. It is a gift, one that Yahweh had hoped to keep from humanity. This reading turns the entire narrative on its head. The true fall may not have been Eve's disobedience, but the divine system that demanded her ignorance. Modern Ethiopian scholars, such as Dr. Getachew Haile and others, have long emphasized that Ethiopian orthodoxy is not simply a copy of European Christianity with black faces. It is an independent spiritual tradition with its own saints, myths, calendars, and cosmic dramas. Its depiction of Satan as not merely a rebellious angel, but potentially a misunderstood being, possibly even feminine, shows a depth and complexity absent in most Western theology. Even the iconography in Ethiopian churches hints at this alternative narrative. While Western art often paints Satan as horned, monstrous, and grotesquely male, Ethiopian murals sometimes depict ambiguous or androgynous figures at the moment of the fall, beings that resemble neither man nor beast, angel nor demon. It is as if Ethiopia's artists, through color and form, preserve the idea of the devil not as a creature of sin, but of transformation. The Vatican, with its history of suppressing texts that threatened its patriarchal order, would have found this notion intolerable. A feminine Satan, one that is not evil, but revolutionary, directly challenges the gender hierarchies embedded in thousands of years of Western religious thought. It complicates the vilification of Eve, reframes the serpent not as a tempter, but as a liberator, and most dangerously of all, it suggests that rebellion against unjust divine rule may be an act of sacred truth, not treachery. So why don't we know this history? Because history is written by the victors, and spiritual history, especially, has been curated by those in power. The Council of Nicaea, the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the Catholic Inquisitions, and the colonial missions to Africa were not just political or religious events. They were acts of spiritual erasure. And what they erased most effectively was the divine feminine, especially when she had teeth, wings, or fangs. Today, as more scholars turn their eyes toward the East and South, toward Ethiopia, Armenia, Nubia, and India, they are uncovering versions of the biblical story that are older, deeper, and far more nuanced than what we were taught. These versions speak not of sin, but of awakening, not of devils, but of choices. And in the heart of it all, we find the feminine, the woman long vilified, long erased, but perhaps never truly gone. The devil may not have always been a woman, but in Ethiopia's Bible, she might have been. And perhaps that, more than anything, explains why the Vatican was so determined to silence her.